Hey, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a whole load of numbers,
We are indeed.
focusing on something maybe a bit niche, the global UV body mists market.
Yeah, maybe sounds niche. But the source material we have, these excerpts from a cognitive market research report, well, they tell quite a story.
Right, so UV body mist, basically sprayable sun protection. Yeah,
Hmm.
often lighter than a lotion.
Exactly that. Think convenience, maybe a different feel. But the data shows it's significant market already and growing fast.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack these numbers, cut through the data points from the report,
Hmm.
understand the scale, the growth, where it's happening. Essentially, pull out the key insights from these specific figures for you.
Think of it as getting the quick version on how big this market is and, crucially, where the report suggests the really dynamic growth is. We're sticking just to what these numbers tell us.
Perfect. Okay, let's jump straight in. Big picture first, a global overview from the report.
Okay, globally, the report puts the UV body mists market at $1,349.93 million back in 2021.
Wow, okay. So over $1.3 billion right from the start in 2021. That's already a pretty decent size.
It is, and the growth trajectory they map out is dollars by 2025.
Okay, so a good jump in just a few years.
Yeah, and then it really accelerates. The
Yeah.
forecast for 2033 is 3,475.66 million.
Whoa. Hang on. So from 1.35 billion in 2021 to almost 3.5 billion by 2033.
That's what the report projects, yes. More than doubling.
Incredible. And the overall growth rate, the compound annual growth rate, CAGR,
The report gives that as 8.2% overall through to 2033.
8.2%. So that's the average annual growth they expect.
Exactly. Think of it like that. And 8.2% globally, that's, a pretty healthy signal for any market.
Definitely sets the scene. Okay, let's break it down then. Region by region, starting with North America. What did the figures show there?
Right. North America, it represented a big chunk in 2021, $356.38 million, according to the report, projected to grow to $484.75 million by 2025, and then quite a leap to $900.2 million by 2033.
Nearly $1 billion just in North America by 2033. And the regional CAGR.
The report has it at 8.044%.
Okay, so slightly under the global average of 8.2%, but still, very solid growth.
Very solid, yes.
And if we drill down a bit within North America, the U.S. is obviously the giant, right?
Oh, absolutely. The report shows the U.S. starting at $292.95 million in 2021.
Okay.
Forecast to reach $397.5 million in 2025, and then climbing up to $735.46 million by 2033.
Huge share of the North American market. What about Canada?
Canada also showing steady growth. It went from $45.62 million in 2021, projected to $60.59 million in 2025, and hitting $110.72 million by 2021.
But projected to reach $26.66 million by 2025, and then a really significant jump to $54.01 million in 2033.
Okay.
And the key thing the report points out is its regional CAGR, 9.226%.
Ah, right. So based just on these figures, Mexico's growth rate is actually forecast to be faster than the U.S. or Canada within that region. Proportionally, yes. That's what the number suggests. Faster proportional growth.
Interesting. So maybe indicating a sort of faster adoption curve or market development kicking in there.
Could be. The numbers certainly point to faster momentum within that North American context.
Okay, let's shift gears. Across the Atlantic Europe, another key market mentioned in the report. What are the headline figures?
Europe's total sales are listed as $372.58 million in 2021.
Okay.
Growing to $505.11 million by 2025, and then expected to reach $928 million by 2033.
Nearly $1 billion there, too, by 2033. And the regional CGR for Europe.
Listed at 7.9%. So again, strong, but slightly below North America's rate and the global average.
Right. And looking at the individual countries, the report details quite a few major players.
It does. You've got Germany, for instance, started at $77.5 million in 2021, projected to more than double to $189.31 million by 2033. The UK also significant, $58.87 million up to $141.98 million over that period.
France, Italy, Russia also listed with substantial market sizes and growth.
Yeah, France heading towards $120 million, Italy over $100 million, Russia around $86 million by 2033, all starting from decent 2021 bases.
Okay. And then there are others like Spain, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Luxembourg, all showing steady growth curves in the data.
That's right. Consistent increases across the board.
But there was something else in Europe the report highlighted as particularly dynamic.
Yes, the rest of Europe category.
Uh,
So while those individual countries are growing strongly, this collective rest of Europe group, according to the report, shows really high momentum. It goes from $33.91 million in 2021 up to $128.06 million by 2033.
wow, that's a big jump for collective rest. And the CAGR for that segment.
That's a standout figure, 10.399%, as listed in the report.
Over 10%. So the highest growth rate within Europe, significantly higher than the major economies listed.
Exactly.
What does that imply, based on the numbers?
Well, it strongly suggests that the demand for UV body mists isn't just concentrated in the biggest European markets. It seems like it's really spreading out, gaining traction rapidly across maybe smaller economies or those not individually detailed, driving that really high collective growth rate.
Fascinating. Okay, let's pivot again. Asia Pacific. The report calls this the largest regional market overall.
That's right, largest by value. It generated $450.88 million back in 2021.
Okay.
Projected to rise to $621.67 million in 2025, and then hitting a really significant $11,199.1 million by 2033.
So $1.2 billion by 2033. Massive market. And its CAGR.
The report lists it at 8.558%.
Correct. So it's the largest market by value globally in these figures, but its growth rate, while above the global average, isn't actually the highest regional rate we've seen.
Correct. Africa and the Middle East have higher CGRs listed, as does that rest of Europe segment.
Right. And within Asia Pacific, China is singled out.
Yes, as the largest country contributor globally based on these specific figures.
What are the numbers for China?
It went from $180.35 million in 2021, projected to hit $483.84 million by 2033.
Wow. Nearly $500 million just in China. That's enormous.
It really is, and Japan and India are also highlighted as very large growing markets in the region.
India looked particularly strong in the projections.
Yes, the report shows India more than doubling, going from $82.96 million in 2021 to $226.63 million by 2033. Japan also more than doubles, from about $46 million to $116 million.
And then you have South Korea, Australia, Singapore, Southeast Asia as a whole, Taiwan, all contributing and showing growth according to the report.
Exactly. It's a huge regional market driven by these major economies, but also showing, pretty widespread growth across the board in the data presented.
Okay, let's head south now to South America. What does the report tell us about that market, scale and growth?
South America's market was valued at $59.4 million in 2021.
Smaller base then.
Yes, smaller base, growing to $76.18 million by 2025 and projected to reach $125.12 million by 2033.
And the regional CAGR here is noted as 6.399% in the report.
That's right.
Which is noticeably lower than the global average and, well, most of the other regions we've discussed.
It is. The numbers still indicate growth, definitely, but just at a, shall we say, less accelerated pace compared to Asia Pacific or Europe or even North America.
Mm-hmm. Brazil is the leader there.
Yes, Brazil leads within the region, according to the figures, going from $27.8 million in 2021 up to $59.12 million by 2033. Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile are also listed, all showing consistent growth trends over the period.
Okay, so growth is happening, but the lower CGR might suggest perhaps a different stage of market maturity or maybe different adoption drivers compared to those faster growing regions.
That seems a reasonable interpretation based purely on these comparative growth rates presented.
Right. Moving on to the Middle East, what picture does the report paint there?
The Middle East market was valued at $68.85 million in 2021.
Okay, similar starting point to South America, roughly.
Roughly, yeah. Forecast to rise to $101.93 million in 2025, and then reaching $201.59 million by 2033.
But the CAGR here is listed as 8.898%, according to the report. That's quite strong.
It is, yes. Notably above the global average. It suggests a faster rate of expansion happening there.
Which countries are highlighted?
Key markets mentioned are Turkey, showing really significant growth from $21.2 million in 2021 to $61.08 million by 2033. Also Saudi Arabia, going from about $11 million to $34 million. And the UAE from around $9.5 million to nearly $29 million.
Egypt and Qatar also showing strong growth in the figures.
Yes, both listed with solid upward trajectory.
That high CAGR in the Middle East,
Mm-hmm.
especially compared to South America's lower rate. Based on these numbers alone, it does suggest maybe factors like climate, lifestyle, perhaps increasing consumer awareness or spending power or really accelerating adoption there?
Well, the numbers certainly imply strong market dynamics pushing that growth rate higher than the global average.
Okay. Last region in the report, Africa. And the report highlights something pretty striking about its growth rate, right?
It does. Africa's market value started at $41.85 million in 2021, the smallest regional base value we've seen here.
We're projected to reach $60.57 million in 2025 and then expand quite significantly to $121.65 million by 2033.
Okay, so still the smallest market overall by 2033 value, but the CAGR, didn't the report say it has the highest regional CAGR?
It does, yeah. That's the really interesting point here. The report lists Africa's CAGR at 9.108%.
9.1%, so the fastest projected regional growth rate in this entire report excerpt.
Exactly. While starting from that smaller base, it's forecast to grow the fastest proportionally.
And the countries mentioned? South Africa, Nigeria.
South Africa is shown as the largest contributor listed, expanding from $20.3 million in 2021 to $58.63 million by 2033. Nigeria also shows very strong growth, $6.19 million up to nearly $19 million. And the rest of Africa segment also shows substantial growth in the number.
Now, that incredibly high growth rate listed for Africa, based just on these numbers, it really jumps out, suggests maybe a market that's perhaps in an earlier adoption phase but experiencing really rapid uptake. That's definitely a key takeaway from the data presented. High velocity growth could point to increasing accessibility, rising awareness, maybe shifting consumer priorities, all contributing to that rapid expansion shown in the figures for that region.
Okay, let's try and connect the dots here. Pulling all these numbers together from the report excerpts.
Yeah.
What are the main takeaways for you?
Well, the big picture is clear. This global market for UV body mists is, according to these projections, set for really substantial expansion. It's expected to more than double in value between 2021 and 2033.
Right. And while Asia-Pacific stands out as the biggest market in terms of absolute dollar value, driven heavily by China.
Exactly. But when you look at the rate of growth, the CAGRs, the picture gets, well, more nuanced, maybe even more interesting, because you see regions like Africa, the Middle East, and even those specific segments like Mexico within North America or the rest of Europe, they're showing particularly high growth rates in the report.
So these numbers suggest that while the big established markets are definitely growing, some of the most accelerated expansion proportionally is happening in these other diverse regions.
Precisely. It might indicate, emerging demand really taking off or new market penetration happening at speed in those areas.
It definitely highlights, based on these figures, a really widespread trend, increasing adoption of this product type across very different global economies and climates.
The data paints a picture of a consumer product category that's diffusing globally quite rapidly, just, at different speeds in different places.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We've seen a global market already worth well over $1 billion back in 2021, projected to grow significantly, broadly across the world, and crucially, some regions showing these particularly explosive growth rates, according to the report.
Yeah, the numbers show a product gaining traction pretty much everywhere, just faster in some places than others.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on, based only on the story these specific numbers are telling us today. Given this really robust and widely spread growth, across such diverse countries, different economic contexts, from mature European markets to rapidly expanding African ones, what underlying factors might these numbers alone suggest? What consumer needs, or maybe lifestyle shifts, or perhaps a growing global awareness around sun protection? What might be driving this worldwide demand reflected in the figures?
Yeah, think about what it means when growth is strong everywhere, but especially strong in such varied places. What common threads might these numbers be hinting at?
Okay, let's dive in. Understanding markets today, it feels like you need, well, two pairs of eyes, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You need that really close-up focus on what people are actually buying, what's hot right now, but also you need that super wide view, the big picture of these global forces shifting everything around.
Absolutely. It's where consumer trends meet, well, the sometimes messy reality of the global economy. You can have the best product idea ever.
Right.
But if your supply chain gets completely tangled up, it's tough.
And that's exactly the dynamic we want to explore today. We're starting right there on the shelf with a really interesting product category that's really taking off, UV body mists.
Catching fires, right?
And then we're going to zoom out, way out, to look at a huge global issue affecting, well, pretty much everything consumers buy right now, mid-2025, this new wave of trade tariffs.
And just to be clear, For this deep dive, all the insights, the data, the trends we're discussing, it's all drawn directly from the latest analysis provided in the source material, specifically from cognitive market research.
Yeah, good point. So our mission here is really to give you a shortcut, a way to understand these two different but definitely connected worlds.
What makes these mists tick? Why are they so popular?
Exactly. And then what's the real story with these tariffs? How are they changing things? And crucially, how do these two stories collide?
Let's get into it.
Okay, part one then. Unpacking UV body mists. Why are these things suddenly everywhere?
It's a fascinating mix, really. A big driver is just more awareness about skin protection generally.
Right. People know about sun damage now.
Exactly. But here's the twist.
Yeah.
They want lightweight options for every single day. It's not just for beach holidays anymore.
Okay.
People get the risks of UV, but let's be honest, nobody really loves that heavy, greasy feel of old school sunscreen, especially not daily or if it's hot and humid.
Tell me about it.
So these UV mists, they offer this incredibly light, non-greasy feel, like barely there. And that's a game changer, especially for younger people, maybe those with oily skin, who just want that daily protection layer without the fuss.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's just a better experience.
Yeah.
And that must tie into convenience too, right? Life's busy.
Oh, hugely. The demand for products you can use on the go, products that do more than one thing, it's massive.
Like multitasking products.
Precisely. UV mists nail this. They often blend SPF with, say, hydration, maybe a light scent. But honestly, the simplest genius is the spray format. You can just spritz it on.
Even over makeup?
Yeah, over makeup, over clothes sometimes. Quick reapplication throughout the day, no mess, no rubbing in for ages. That ease is just perfect for anyone rushing around commuters, people traveling, athletes.
Okay, so it's practical. But is this just a, drugstore trend? Or is it hitting those higher-end markets too, the clean beauty space?
Oh, absolutely hitting the premium and natural segment. Big time. A lot of these mists are formulated to be clean label, so non-toxic ingredients, sometimes reef-safe formulas.
Wow, right.
They're using botanical extracts, focusing on eco-friendly packaging, and that means they can appeal to the health-conscious crowd and still work in the mass market. It's smart positioning.
Okay, so the drivers seem pretty clear. People want protection, but easy, light protection. Convenience is key. Yeah, and it fits with that clean trend, but it can't all be positive, right? What are the downsides? What's holding this market back a bit?
Yeah, no market's perfect. One key restraint is actually awareness, but specifically outside the more developed markets.
Dang.
Meaning, in a lot of emerging regions, using sunscreen every day just isn't a habit yet. It's not routine.
Okay.
So the whole idea of a UV body mist is even newer, you know? There's still a basic education gap about why you need SPF every day, not just when you're actively trying to get a tan. That's a real hurdle outside the big city sometimes.
Gotcha. So people aren't even using basic sunscreen daily. A fancy mist version is a harder sell.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What about actually making and selling these things? Any issues there?
Oh, yeah. That brings us neatly to regulatory hurdles and labeling. Sunscreens are notoriously tricky.
Why that?
Because the rules are super strict, but also completely different depending on where you are. The US, the EU, various countries in Asia, they all have their own specific requirements for proving SPF effectiveness, for stability testing, safety data. It's a patchwork.
Sounds complicated.
It really is.
Yeah.
And that complexity makes everything harder, formulating the product, what you can claim on the packaging, actually getting it approved. It adds significant cost and time, especially if you're a brand trying to sell globally.
A bit of a nightmare for businesses then.
Definitely. And it links directly to the third main challenge mentioned in the source, keeping the product stable and giving it a decent shelf life.
Ah, okay. How so?
Well, think about it. You're trying to mix sensitive SPF filters with things that can be quite volatile, like fragrances or maybe delicate plant extracts.
Right.
And you need that whole concoction to stay stable and effective, even when it's sitting in potentially hot, sunny conditions over time. That's a big chemical challenge.
I can imagine.
It often means these mists have shorter shelf lives than, say, a simple moisturizer, which can lead to product waste, customer returns, maybe expensive reformulations. And it's particularly an issue in hot, humid places.
Ironically, exactly where you probably need the product most.
Exactly. So yeah, formulation, regulations, stability, those are real constraints.
Okay, so navigating those challenges is key. Looking ahead then, what trends are shaping the next stage for UV mist? What's coming down the pipe?
Well, one really interesting trend is the rise of hybrid formulations and also inclusivity.
Hybrid how?
Mists that aren't just SPF. They're adding in other skincare benefits. Moisturizers, maybe anti-pollution ingredients, skin brighteners,
Yeah.
becoming real skincare multitaskers.
Okay, smart.
And critically, there's a huge push for formulas that work on a really wide range of skin tones. The big one is eliminating that dreaded white cast you sometimes get with mineral sunscreens.
Oh, that's huge. People hate the white cast.
They really do. So making products that blend invisibly on deeper skin tones, that's a major focus. It removes a barrier for a lot of people and ties into that whole demand for more inclusive beauty overall.
Definitely important. And, I mean, where are people even hearing about these new mists and learning how to use them? Social media must be playing a part.
A massive part. You can't overstate the impact of social media and influencers. We're talking beauty gurus, but also dermatologists popping up on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
They're constantly reinforcing that message, wear sunscreen daily. But crucially for mists, they show you how easy reapplication is. You see someone just quickly spray it over their makeup while they're out.
Right, it normalizes it.
Exactly. It makes it seem effortless, maybe even a bit cool.
Yeah.
And that's fundamentally shifting habits, especially for Gen Z, for millennials.
Turning it from a chore into something easy. Okay. Any other big trends shaping this market?
Yeah, one more key one is the expansion into men's grooming and also the active lifestyle market.
Interesting. How so?
Well, these mists are often positioned as really practical, straightforward, kind of gender-neutral solutions.
Less fussy than lotions, maybe.
Exactly. They're non-greasy, they dry quickly, they're often sweat-resistant. So, perfect for tossing in a gym bag, or for guys who want a simple daily routine without feeling like they're using a heavy cosmetic. It's opening up whole new growth areas beyond the traditional sort of female-focused sun care market.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so we've just dug into this really booming product category, UV body mists, driven by some very clear consumer shifts and clever innovation.
Yep.
But like you said right at the start, a great product isn't the whole story, is it? Companies making these mists, or anything really, have to operate in this wider, sometimes kind of crazy global economic picture. And right now, mid-2025, that picture involves some pretty dramatic changes on the trade front.
It really does. The source material points specifically to these sweeping new tariffs, the ones introduced by the U.S. under the Trump administration back in April.
The Liberation Day tariffs, they're called.
That's the name, yeah. And their stated goal is pretty explicit. Make imports more expensive to try and boost manufacturing here in the U.S.
And they've already kicked in.
Oh, yes. And the impact on global supply chains has been, well, significant.
No.
Pretty fast.
The source mentioned some specific numbers, didn't it? Showing the range.
It did, like 10% on goods coming from allies like the UK, but then jumping way up, potentially to 46% on products from places like Vietnam, and a kind of blanket 34% on a lot of imports from China.
Wow, okay. That's substantial.
It is. And it's had this immediate, quite disruptive effect, especially on industries that rely heavily on manufacturing in Asia. Think apparel, home appliances.
And personal care.
And personal care, yes.
Yeah.
They're all suddenly dealing with much higher production costs and also frustrating delays in getting components and finished goods.
Which loops right back to those UV body mists we were just discussing.
Exactly. It connects directly. The personal care sector, it uses a lot of imported ingredients, specialized packaging bits.
Like those spray nozzles, maybe?
Could be the nozzles, could be a specific botanical extract, could be the bottle itself. And suddenly the cost of those components jumps. Or worse, they get stuck at a port. This isn't just some abstract economic number. It means real delays in getting new products onto shelves, like those innovative hybrid mists or ones with special eco-packaging we talked about.
So you could have the perfect new formula ready to go, but the bottle costs 30% more overnight, or you just can't get it.
Precisely. It throws a huge wrench in the works for product launches and planning.
And China's right at the center of this disruption, according to the source.
Yes, largely because tariffs often aren't a one-way street. They frequently trigger retaliation.
Meaning China puts tariffs on U.S. goods in return.
Exactly. Reciprocal tariffs. So the cost of doing business with China, still a massive manufacturing hub, suddenly skyrockets for everyone involved, going both ways.
That must put enormous pressure on brands.
Huge pressure, especially smaller companies, maybe ones without huge cash reserves or complex global operations. They face these really tough choices.
Like,
do you just eat the cost and watch your margins vanish? Do you try to pass it on to consumers by raising prices and risk losing customers?
or maybe cut back on the number of products you offer?
Yeah, shrink the range. Or The riskiest path, maybe try to find cheaper ingredients or packaging, which could end up damaging the brand's quality or reputation. It's a really difficult balancing act.
So, faced with all this sudden volatility, how are businesses even trying to cope? What strategies are they using?
Well, this is where that kind of detailed market intelligence we mentioned earlier, like from cognitive market research, becomes absolutely vital. It's not just nice to have anymore, it's essential for navigating this.
How does it help specifically?
Companies are using it to really map out their supply chains, pinpoint where the biggest risks are because of these tariffs, which suppliers, which countries are most affected, and just as importantly, identify potential alternatives. Are there other countries we could source this component from that are less impacted? Or maybe even bring some production closer to home?
So it informs those big sourcing decisions.
Definitely. And also pricing strategy. How much can we raise prices? What are competitors doing? It even feeds back into product design. Can we tweak the formula or the packaging to use materials from less tariff-heavy regions?
It sounds like it's forcing companies to be much more strategic, much more data-driven about their operations.
It really is. We're seeing major global players actively rethinking and restructuring their entire sourcing networks. The source mentions companies like Nike and IKEA,
Right?
who are consciously expanding their manufacturing presence in places like Vietnam, India, Mexico. It's about diversification, not having all your eggs in one basket, especially not one basket that's suddenly become very expensive.
Spreading the risk.
Exactly. Other tactics include using AI for better demand forecasting. You really don't want excess inventory sitting around when costs are high. Literally redesigning products sometimes, demanding much more transparency from suppliers about their suppliers, building strategic partnerships based on solid data to stay flexible. It's all about agility and resilience now.
Okay, so putting it all together, what we've really looked at here are two sides of the coin, right? On one side, you have this hot consumer product, UV mists, booming because they meet real needs with smart innovation.
Product market fit.
And on the other side, you have this huge external force, these trade tariffs, fundamentally changing the rules of the game for how you even make and sell anything globally.
And the key takeaway, really, is that succeeding in this mid-2025 landscape, it demands both. You need that great product, that innovation, but you equally need sharp strategy and, frankly, a lot of resilience to handle the bumps in the global supply chain road. You can't succeed with just one.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how those huge geopolitical headlines we scan, tariff disputes, trade policy shifts, how they actually trickle all the way down to affect the specific things we pick up off the shelf every day.
Yeah, the connection is very real.
And it really underscores that ongoing tightrope walk for businesses, trying to innovate and bring us cool new things, while constantly juggling the unpredictable reality of where parts come from and how much they'll cost next month.
Absolutely. And just as a final note, if this discussion about either the UV body mists market specifically or the broader tariff impact has sparked your interest and you need more granular detail, the source material does mention that organizations like Cognitive Market Research offer different report versions. You can get global views or drill down into specific countries for the UV body mists market, for instance.
Right.
Their team is apparently available if you have really specific needs for a custom report. And as noted in the source, you can often ask for a free sample report too, just to get a sense of the data they offer.
Good to know. Definitely a complex landscape out there.